So I've been interested in these kinds of sounds lately. They're the kind of thing you see more in trailers, I think, but Jedi Survivor has a lot of good examples. As well as Boom Library, they really seem to like this style. And I recently saw James Denham talking about a method he had for making these sounds in Tonstrom's Whoosh plugin, and I wanted to see if I could recreate that in SerumFX, because I can't be bothered to buy Whoosh myself, as well as taking my own spin on that kind of sound aesthetic. The basis of my rack here is basically 4 instances of SerumFX, each playing back an audio file and its noise oscillator, with envelopes tied to the pitch and volume of each sample. These all go into an overall effects rack, which ties the sound together and adds more movement. Having loads of modulation, both tied to the volume envelope of the sound and just freely moving, helps to make variation, and things like phasing or denoising tends to give it the nice smoothed out sound that makes it feel more like a whoosh. Here's just some source from my previous wet sci-fi sounds video going through SerumFX with no processing. So on the individual tracks, I tend to only use an EQ to make space for other sounds, and the rest is just on the whole stack. So here I start with another instance of SerumFX. This has hyperdimension, which is my favorite way to get phasey sounds because I'm not a really big fan of the moving comb filter that you get from extreme phasing or flanging. It also has some subtle, more analog style distortion. I do have a static comb filter here that I use for some of the sounds. I can apply envelopes to all of these as well, just within the plugin. Next, I just have an EQ cutting some of the muddy lows that you get from layering stuff like this, and boosting the highs that it tends to kind of take out if you pitch stuff down. Doppler Dome is a free plugin that could really replace the SerumFXs at the start if you don't have it, but I really like how Serum changes the playback rate of the samples as it's changing the pitch, whereas Doppler Dome is kind of live pitch shifting. It gives more movement and is the only thing actually moving the sound between the pan stereo field. I really like how you can draw your own shape and set the rate for the movement to be disconnected from the tempo. After that is NC17. I just love it for subtle compression and distortion. Driver here is giving a little bit more subtle distortion. I really like how it doesn't tend to add a whole lot of high end, but it just kind of glues the sound together, makes it a bit fat and muddy, which I like. Frequency shifting and pitch shifting here are things that I don't always use, but can kind of change the sound in different ways. I have this LFO on the frequency shifter as well because it could just add more movement, and I think frequency shifting things down gives it a nice kind of hollow sound that if it's kind of really muddy in the low mids can help. Hitting the compression now, Solid Dynamics is making the peak of the sound a little bit smoother, so it overall isn't as kind of slappy and transient based, and it brings up the tail a bit because I want to keep all the detail there, especially if I end up only using the tail in a later redesign or project. Finally, K-Clip, which I just picked up the free version of. It's doing a bit more final clipping and dynamic control. I haven't really delved into this plugin yet, so I might change the settings on here later. As for what to actually put through this rack, I think you could use the framework here for a lot of different things, like maybe more organic alien type sounds, or even things like engines and sci-fi gun tails. But I tend to use design sounds I've already made to combine and kind of add more movement to them. I also like putting synths through this, especially layered with more natural stuff, some really interesting tones. I'll get to the layering part in a second. And lastly, I really like using field recordings that are fairly constant and noisy, but with interesting little details like gunshot or explosion tails, or things like cloth moving. I've also been using some of these designed impacts that Boom Library gave away for free over Christmas. They're already kind of phasey and have some nice constant but detailed sounds. The results from this rack get really interesting when you start combining different timbres and timings and even pitches together. I like using more clicky synthetic sounds, like a little build up, and then more washy distorted sounds for the main body. Having the pitch go from high to low can give the overall sound a nice tail as well, since a lot of these samples sound really interesting when they're being kind of pitched down and faded out. Making super short whooshes can be good to experiment with and maybe a little bit more useful if you're using them within gameplay. Adding tonal layers or just pitching up the sounds you already have really far can have some really nice results. You can even layer sounds with this rack with other sounds outside of the rack, like kicks or other bits of synths, to give it more of a transient or just more of a change in timbre. To take the sound further, some stuff I've been experimenting with to get different tones out of this are using vocoders on some of the layers. It tends to gate the sound too heavily to put it on the whole stack and you just lose the tail. But for individual layers, especially ones that are perhaps a bit more simple, it can give them a nice, bit more clicky quality. I like going with 4 to 16 bands and moving the formant up, which can make it sound a little bit more clear and give it some more high end that the vocoder wants to take away, especially with fewer bands. One thing that James Denham did in his video, which I really enjoy, is mapping the resonance frequency in driver to the volume envelope of the overall sound. It gives it a lot of tonality, which means you don't have to put as much tonal source into it. And the kind of filter movement you get sounds quite nice as well. I feel like putting less detailed source into this with the driver resonance would make some really nice kind of spaceship engine flybys. Convolution can help with the dynamic shape of the sound, and you can convert this more kind of whooshy stuff into explosions or constant engines or even maybe creature sounds if you convolve it the right way. My go-to convolution currently is Convolugy XT, and it lets me change stuff like the duration and pitch of the modulator signal, which gives it a lot of utility. Finally, something like M ratio MB with its noise tonal setting can give it more of an aliased, less detailed sound similar to a D reverb, which I don't have. And that's everything I wanted to show in this rack. I want to say thanks for getting me to 1,000 subscribers. I really only make these videos for my own enjoyment, so seeing that it's helped other people is really cool. I don't plan on stopping anytime soon. Thanks for watching.